There's a lot of international mail that flows to a small nation in Western Africa. The mail is addressed to an address that should be right here along this main street. But I asked my friend to go there and check it out, and he didn't find anything.
I've been looking for Eddie Broad Street. I'm going to say that Eddie Broad Street doesn't exist.
Instead, the mail that is addressed to go here is actually brought to a building down the road. Right here.
Right here, this building is where all LISC Arab bills are forwarded from the building that doesn't exist on Eddie Broad Street.
From there, the mail is scanned and sent electronically thousands of miles away to a nondescript office building outside of Washington, D.C. It's actually right near my house in Northern Virginia.
What the fuck?
Henry, check out this random building. Does this building look super boring to you?
Oh.
This building is right near our house. I guess I expected something a little bit more interesting. This process is a part of a secretive web of corporate secrecy. It's a web that is built off of years of strange connections between the United States and the country of Liberia, a nation invented by a group of Americans here in Virginia. This is how the US stashed its secrets off the coast of West Africa.
What the fuck?
In this
Bro.
building, there is a bunch of mail that comes from a little country in West Africa, and it gets sent to this
Virginia
building
is-
near our house.
Virginia is full of these fucking weird, like, gray brutalist buildings that just house the world's secrets in them. Like, this is just Virginia, and this is a perfect summarization of fucking Virginia. Okay? Langley in general. It's just like all these gray ass buildings where you're like, what the fuck's going on in there? It's kind of creepy. That's not brutalist. I feel like it is. It's not.
Does that seem kind of weird to you?
Yes, what did they do with it?
That's what I want to figure out here. So let's say I want to start an international corporation and start doing business abroad. I live here in the United States, so naturally I would want to start my company here in the US. But when I ask the internet how to do this, I get a bunch of ads that look like this. Even though my office would be here in Washington, D.C. in the United States, the internet is telling me that on paper I should set up my corporation in one of these random small countries around the world. Places like the British Virgin Islands, or Mauritius, or Belize, Gibraltar, Malta, the Seychelles Islands. Wait, the Seychelles? Like that tiny island nation in the middle of the Indian Ocean that has like less than 100,000 people? It's like 40 hours of flying to get there. Why would I want to set up my business in the Seychelles?
Wonder why.
Here's why. If I set up my corporation on paper in the British Virgin Islands or the Seychelles, suddenly I actually don't have to pay very much taxes, if any at all. My new corporation now won't have to actually obey any of the corporate laws here in the United States, which require you to publish all sorts of information about your finances, about your corporation to the public record. If my corporation is in the Seychelles, I don't have to do any of that. This is actually starting to seem like a
I'm writing this down, chat. I'm writing this down so I get to know. Okay.
pretty attractive option. These tiny nations have set up their laws to attract big corporations for this very purpose, to set up on paper in their country so that the government can make a little bit of money off of the little taxes they receive and any of the registration fees and dues. And it's not just corporations. The same concept applies to shipping vessels. These are big barges that make our world economy run, and they spend most of their time in water that belongs to no country, and yet they still have to follow the rules of the country whose flag they fly, where they're registered. And so if you register to a country that has very low taxes and no laws around how you need to treat your employees on the boat and what safety regulations you need to follow, then those are the rules you need to follow when you're out on the high sea. So the modern global economy turns out to be a race to the bottom. Corporations and shipping vessels registering themselves to whatever country will give them the least amount of accountability and transparency. We call these havens, tax havens, or shelters. And this isn't just like shady criminal corporations. Most corporations that you interact with on a daily basis have loads of subsidiaries in faraway tax havens that they have set up to escape transparency and accountability.
Yo, Johnny's spitting, dude. Yo.
Okay, but back to me and my corporation that I theoretically want to sign up. If I want to set up in the Seychelles or the British Virgin Islands, this is actually kind of complicated. How do I navigate all the laws and the paperwork? Ask the internet. And when I ask the internet, I get a bunch of ads. These are ads of companies who are dedicated to helping corporations set up in these offshore jurisdictions, in these tax havens. So if I want to set up in the British Virgin Islands, I could choose a bunch of different companies to help me get that paperwork done. And then while I actually do my business back here in Washington, D.C., they help manage all the taxes and the requirements and all the little things I need to do to upkeep my little facade of having a company in this place, even though I actually don't. Okay, so here's where this gets weird. We're talking about tax havens and offshore jurisdictions and all this stuff. Let's get back to Liberia, which Liberia is one of these tax havens. It's a place that has structured its laws to attract foreign corporations and shipping vessels to register with them so that they can make a little money off of those dues and taxes. When I go to start my corporation in Liberia, I don't get a bunch of ads for middlemen who want to help me set up my new Liberian corporation. Instead, I'm funneled to one company, this one. And this company boasts that it has the exclusive right to handle all companies that want to register their corporation or ship in Liberia. This is the company whose building is near my house. And on the surface, it just looks like another middleman paper pusher. Super boring. But you peek under the surface and there's something way bigger going on here. Not just a corporation running away from taxes and accountability. But instead, this is a symbol of how the US projects its power in the 21st century, and how it uses other countries to hide its secrets. Quick pause for a second. Thank you fully for supporting this video. Let's get back to the story of Liberia and what the heck is happening in Liberia. It gets pretty nuts from here. What's the deal? Why does this one random building in Virginia run a network of corporate secrecy in the country of Liberia? Like, it's so weird, and as soon as you start to go down this rabbit hole, it just gets weirder. And the short answer here is that the United States of America literally invented the country of Liberia. Back in the 1800s, here in the United States, the biggest, most important debate was over slavery. This issue led the country to almost imploding on itself in a bloody civil war. During this debate, there emerged three major camps with the slavery issue. One were the abolitionists, the people who were like, dude, this is wrong. Let's reform our country to be done with this terrible thing we've done. And then, of course, there were the people on the pro-slavery side who were often had a financial incentive to keep slavery alive with their plantations and their businesses. But then there was this third camp in the middle who were on paper against slavery. They wanted to get rid of slavery. It was a bad thing. But they didn't really want the freed Black Americans to...
Wasn't Abe Lincoln also in this category, by the way? And told Frederick Douglass that eventually that you would have to go to Liberia?
integrate into American society. As this debate raged on, there were some Americans here in Virginia who came up with a solution. What if we gave the option to enslaved people who had been freed to go to Africa, where their ancestors came from? We could ship them back, we could buy a piece of land, and they would all flock to the boats to go back to Africa, was the thinking here. The quasi-abolitionists kind of liked this, because they're like, oh yeah, we can get the moral buzz out of being against slavery, but we don't have to deal with the complicated consequences of our actions to reintegrate these people into our society. And then of course, the slave owners liked this too because it meant that any freed Black Americans could be shipped away so they wouldn't foment rebellion among those enslaved people who were still working on plantations. So there was this strange alignment between these quasi-abolitionists and these slave owners, and they started their own organization. So this organization that was based here in Virginia bought a piece of land in Western Africa with money from their supporters and from the US government. And they started sending ships full of Black people to this land to create a settlement that they called Liberia,
or Land of the Free. They named the capital Monrovia after President James Monroe, who was a fierce supporter of this effort to send away free black Americans.
Almost died while fucking eating
so
food.
At this point, I'm sure you're kind of like, wait a minute. What was this curveball? We went from talking about the Seychelles and tax havens to talking about how a bunch of Virginians started sending freed black Americans to a piece of land in Africa that they bought. And this is where these two come together. Soon, the Liberians declare independence. Liberian locals, the ones who had come from the United States, that started to take power and actually be the leaders of the country. They actually started to enact slavery of their own in their society, just like they had seen in the United States. But behind the scenes of all of this, the US political interests that started this whole thing remained. They had an actual building there, and they were actually calling the shots. So Liberia was independent on paper, but in reality, the US had as much influence as ever in their little colony in Africa. And that influence became really useful 100 years later. So it's 100 years later, the US just got out of World War II, and you have this guy. This guy was the Secretary of State for the US, which is like the foreign minister. He became a US representative at the UN, and he was out on a diplomatic tour that brought him to Liberia. While in Liberia, this little African nation that was created by the United States and still had deep ties to the United States, he looked at the deep sea port that the US had created during World War II, and his wheels started turning. He returned to the United States and quickly stepped down from his role as a diplomat. Harry Truman really wanted him to stick around as a diplomat, but he had actually a very strong reason to leave. Truman said that he had an earnest insistence to go do his own thing. This guy was a diplomat, but he was also a businessman, and what he saw during his visit to Liberia revealed a business opportunity that he just could not leave on the table. So over the next year, this ex-Secretary of State started scheming with the Liberian government. And in September 1947, he came out and announced that he, a private American citizen, had made a deal with the Liberian government. He created a company, an American-based company based here in Virginia, that was to be the exclusive middleman between any international corporation and the government of Liberia. Basically, if anyone wanted to set up their corporation in Liberia, they would have to go through this guy and his new company. He helped the Liberian government craft laws that would make it very attractive for people to put the Liberian flag on their ship or on their company. And over the next few years, this gained major traction. At this time, any shipping vessel that had the American flag or the Soviet flag would be subject to a bunch of trade barriers that were starting to go up as a part of this Cold War between the US and the Soviets. This ex-Secretary of State and his new company would go around and say, hey, put the Liberian flag on your ship, and now you can trade with whoever the hell you want. The Liberian registry exploded, and now you had ships flying the Liberian flag, not having to pay barely any taxes and not having to obey any laws from the United States, and being able to trade with whomever they want, because
Bro, my man invented offshoring? That's crazy.
Liberia was officially neutral in the Cold War. The Liberian Registry was born, and it was thriving. So in recent decades, the number of ships that register under the Liberian flag, who never step foot in Liberia, by the way, but have their flag on their ship, has grown. And it has become the second most common flag on international ships in the world, only second to Panama. Meanwhile, the company here in Virginia who has a monopoly over this registry is getting super rich, and they're giving some of those riches to the Liberian government. But what the Liberian government does with that money is actually probably the ugliest underbelly of this whole story. So by the late 90s, this company's doing great. Liberia's taking in a bunch of money from all of the ships registering under their flag. But then this guy, Charles Taylor, becomes the president.
How can I help you on Liberian shipping registries? It's a long time since I've been looking at them.
What has the registry allowed the government of Liberia
to do that it wouldn't be able to do otherwise.
It was one of the most consistent, dependable sources of revenue for the Liberian government. That was important, particularly in the Charles Taylor period when it was civil war in Liberia and there were no other sources of revenue. It was a war economy.
He starts taking the money that's coming in from all these ship and corporation registries, but not just to fight these wars. He goes on to commit some of the most egregious crimes the world has ever seen.
I was the one myself that investigated the shipping registry. We found, documented, exposed that the shipping registry, that its revenues were being diverted to purchase arms and ammunition in violation of UN sanctions.
And yet the corporations and ships that fly the Liberian flag
Oh shit!
don't even have to think about this.
It's Istanbul, bro. Both of those are Istanbul.
Corporations and ships
Istanbul.
that fly the Liberian flag don't even
Also Istanbul.
have to think about this stuff. They don't step foot in Liberia. They've never met Charles Taylor or any of his people. They just go about doing their thing and doing all of their business through a nondescript office right near my house, where
Not
a
Constantinople.
company is getting very rich using Liberia as the facade, but really everything is happening right here. The money is being made right here, and a little bit of that is being sent to Liberia, and Liberia is using it to do terrible things. Charles Taylor eventually
Americans be like, you see, this is why you shouldn't do profit sharing. This is why we shouldn't have engaged in revenue sharing with Charles Taylor to begin with. They're using the money for bad things. I should keep this money for myself instead.
goes to the International Court of Justice and gets indicted on 1 million really horrible counts. Goes to jail for the rest of his life. But the registry that helped fund his horrible rise remains, and remains as a mechanism for helping many corporations around the world hide their secrets and evade accountability. And this connection between these two unlikely places
Chill out. He's very clearly memeing about fucking like he's LARPing as a conservative. That's why he put K Kona W. Like when I fucking put the MAGA hat on.
retains a similar purpose as its original one, way back in the 1800s, when with the support of the US government, private interests sent away their secrets and their guilt to a faraway place. And that hasn't really stopped happening. Today, with the blessing of the US government, corporations continue to deposit their secrets in this same faraway place, far away from any real accountability. Thank you all for watching this video. This is the type of video that I want to do more of. A video like this takes longer, it takes more time, because it's a lot more research, it's more interviews. I'm actually diving way deeper into these stories than the typical explainer you see on this channel. And that's what I want to do starting in 2021. I want to start doing more stories like this. My patrons make that possible, and brands like Fully who care about
Respect, dude. Hey. This was a very good video. And Johnny didn't fucking pull up, we're inviting Liberian corruption into our homes type shit. Instead, he actually invited Karl Marx into his home briefly. It seemed like he invited a little bit of leftist radicalization into his home.